The crash has already started, and no one's prepared. Showrooms are packed with bikes nobody wants, loan approvals are vanishing, and used prices are falling off a cliff. This isn't a slowdown, it's a full-blown collapse. And what's coming next could wipe out an entire generation of riders and dealerships. The price no one will pay. It used to be a dream. Walk into a dealership, see your reflection on a new fuel tank, sign a few papers, and ride out with a machine that felt like freedom. Today, that dream has collapsed under its own weight. Motorcycles have become unaffordable for the very people who once kept the industry alive. In 2019, a mid-level cruiser might have cost $15,000. In 2025, that same bike sits with a price tag approaching $22,000 without adding a single horsepower, safety feature, or major innovation. Riders have noticed, and they are walking away. This is not just inflation. This is strategic miscalculation by manufacturers who overestimated post-pandemic demand and tried to capitalize on supply chain scarcity. Instead of returning to competitive pricing once logistics stabilized, they doubled down on luxury tier margins. Every year, prices crept higher. Entry-level models that once welcomed new riders now sit firmly out of reach. Models like the Honda Rebel, once a staple for beginners, are now priced in the five-figure range when fully equipped. Even modest touring bikes carry costs once reserved for luxury cars. The sticker shock has become impossible to ignore. Across forums, social media, and dealership floors, the message is the same. Buyers are refusing to participate in a system that no longer values them. And with every unsold bike, the pressure behind the scenes builds. The rebellion against pricing is not a boycott. It is a mass opt-out from a market that forgot who it was built for. But the financial shock is just one part of the story. What happens next on showroom floors across the country reveals just how deeply the industry has misread its buyers. Dealers beg, riders refuse. Walk into many dealerships today and you will find a silent showroom. Not because no one is working, but because no one is buying. Rows of motorcycles sit untouched, some gathering dust after more than 200 days on the floor. Harley-Davidsons, Hondas, Yamahas, all lined up like inventory at a liquidation sale. The dealerships are not the enemy here. In fact, they are panicking. Dealers do not own most of the bikes on their floors. They finance them through floor plan loans, meaning they pay interest every month a motorcycle sits unsold. As inventories swell, these interest payments are crushing small and mid-sized dealers. Some have slashed prices by up to $5,000. Others are offering 0% financing for up to 36 months. Yet the bikes still do not move. Riders know that further cuts are likely. They see the desperation, and it only fuels the belief that waiting longer will yield better deals. The more dealers try to sell, the more obvious it becomes that buyers are in control. Test rides are up, but purchases are down. Salespeople are throwing in gear, accessories, even maintenance packages. Still, riders walk away. They have time. The industry does not. Behind the scenes, the losses are piling up. Smaller dealers, especially independent family-run shops, are quietly shutting down. They cannot survive on test rides and hope. Larger corporate chains can absorb losses longer, but even they are beginning to reduce staff and limit new orders. The market is breaking at the ground level. And just when dealers think it cannot get worse, the lenders show up and lock the door. The motorcycle market is shifting, and it's not looking pretty for many riders. We've broken it all down, but we want to hear from you. Subscribe, give a thumbs up, and share your take in the comments below. Let's get the conversation going. The banks shut the gate. For years, motorcycle financing was a lifeline. Buyers could walk in with fair credit and ride out with a low-interest loan, sometimes at 3% or 4%. That era is over. In 2025, loan rates have soared to more than 9% for even well-qualified borrowers. For those with imperfect credit, rates of 13, 15, or even 18% are not uncommon. Suddenly, a $25,000 touring bike becomes a $40,000 commitment over 5 years. The joy of the ride is buried under compounding interest. Banks are nervous. Rising repossession rates have made them deeply skeptical of motorcycle buyers. Even those who get approved are often required to put down larger deposits or accept shorter loan terms. The goal is not to empower riders, it is to minimize bank risk. This change has devastated the market. Financing is no longer a tool for accessibility, it is a barrier to entry, and it disproportionately affects younger riders and working-class enthusiasts. Many are turning to the used market looking for older bikes that can be paid for in cash. But even there, prices remain high, and loan terms are just as punishing. As financing becomes a fortress, many would-be buyers are left standing outside the gate, watching the industry lock itself away from the very people it was meant to serve. And that isolation has a ripple effect that is now shaking the industry from top to bottom. If you're still riding through this mess, gear up smart. We've linked the jackets, helmets, and gloves that are actually worth the money. Check the description. The collapse spreads. The cracks began at the edges. One unsold bike here, one denied loan there. Now the collapse is cascading through the entire motorcycle ecosystem. Manufacturers are slashing production across the board. Harley-Davidson has announced a 25% reduction in factory output. Honda and BMW are laying off workers and freezing research and development budgets. The logic is simple. If dealers cannot move bikes, factories should not be building them. This has a domino effect. With fewer bikes ordered, suppliers of tires, frames, suspension components, and electronics are also cutting staff or shutting down altogether. Logistics companies that once relied on steady motorcycle freight are losing business. Marketing budgets are slashed. Innovation halts. New model development is postponed indefinitely. The once vibrant pipeline of motorcycle engineering is rusting shut. The global nature of the collapse makes it more dangerous. Japan, Germany, and the United States are all experiencing parallel slowdowns. Tariffs, material shortages, and international instability only deepen the crisis. In the past, strong global demand might have balanced out local dips. Not this time. The slowdown is synchronized and severe, and as manufacturers begin to cannibalize their own networks, offering direct-to-consumer sales or bypassing dealerships with online flash sales, the very structure of the motorcycle business is being rewritten. What was once a proud, community-driven industry is being transformed into a fractured, top-down survival race. And the casualties are mounting fast. That ecosystem starts to buckle even harder once the repossessions begin. Repossessed, resold, rejected. Motorcycle repossessions have surged by over 28% since the beginning of 2024. That number is not just alarming, it is historic. For an industry that was already fragile, this sudden wave of defaults has pulled the rug out from under every remaining layer of financial stability. And it is not just struggling riders being affected. Every repossessed motorcycle re-enters the market and further drives down resale value for every other bike. Thousands of motorcycles, many less than 1 year old, are now being auctioned off for a fraction of their original price. Riders who financed new bikes at inflated prices are underwater, with loan balances that far exceed what their bikes are worth today. Some are choosing to walk away entirely, allowing the banks to seize the bikes rather than keep making massive monthly payments on a depreciating asset. This repossession loop creates a devastating ripple. First, it crushes used market values, which in turn undermines the trade-in value for everyone else. A bike that was worth $10,000 just 1 year ago might now be valued at $7,000 or less because of how saturated the used market has become. That loss in value freezes buyer confidence. Riders thinking of upgrading hold off. Dealers stop taking trade-ins, and lenders tighten their standards knowing that resale recovery is unlikely. There is no hero in this scenario, and the harshest consequences are being felt by the brands whose models now sit untouched. The models no one wants. When dealerships are full of motorcycles no one is buying, the conversation changes from how do we sell more to why did we build these in the first place? Across the country, specific models are being quietly blacklisted by dealers who simply cannot move them. These are not obscure or unknown bikes. Many come from the biggest names in the industry. Their failure reveals just how disconnected the manufacturers have become from their buyers. The Harley-Davidson Livewire, the Indian Challenger Dark Horse, the Kawasaki Ninja H2 SXSE. These models were supposed to represent the future: electrification, power, premium features. Instead, they now symbolize everything buyers are avoiding. The Livewire's $22,000 price tag and limited range have alienated both traditional Harley riders and new entrants. The Indian Challenger, while technically impressive, cannot justify its price point against more affordable competitors. Even the once revered Ninja H2 SX SE, with its supercharged bragging rights, is proving far too expensive and impractical for the average rider. It is not just about price, it is about misreading the room. Riders today are more cost-sensitive, more practical, and less interested in buying motorcycles that require high insurance premiums, specialized maintenance, or constant recharging. Dealers are reporting that some of these models have been sitting unsold for nearly 1 full year. The longer they stay, the more reluctant buyers become. And soon, even decent bikes start to look like liabilities just because they are sharing showroom space with market flops. Once the reputation of a model collapses, recovery is nearly impossible. And nothing kills a reputation faster than a price no one believes in. The price bubble has burst. For years, manufacturers operated under the illusion that motorcycle buyers would keep paying more, year after year, no matter how inflated the sticker got. They were wrong. The price bubble that formed between 2020 and 2024 is now in full collapse, and disbelief is turning into backlash. In some cases, new motorcycles are still priced 20 to 40% above what riders consider fair value. Take the Harley-Davidson Street Glide. In 2019, it retailed for around $22,000. Today, some dealers are asking upwards of $35,000 for the same bike with only modest upgrades. Entry-level models like the Indian Scout or Harley Nightster have crept above $15,000, pushing away the very riders these bikes were designed to attract. Even reliable names like Honda and Yamaha have not been immune, with price hikes across sport, touring, and adventure categories pricing them out of the reach of many working-class riders. This gap between perceived value and sticker price is not just academic. It creates paralysis. Riders hold back. Dealers cut prices but cannot recover profit, and manufacturers are forced to scale back production, often too late to prevent massive losses. What was once a thriving premium segment is now imploding under its own weight. The market can no longer support inflated price points. Buyers are exhausted, and the emotional tone has shifted from trust to disbelief to resentment. The industry overreached. Now it must reckon with the consequences, and what's coming next may be even harder to stomach than the collapse itself. The manufacturers who overplayed their hand. They saw the signs, but they ignored them. While riders begged for more affordable models and dealers struggled to move product, major manufacturers were still doubling down on inflated pricing, luxury tier bundles, and costly add-ons that no longer made sense in the real economy. The gamble? That the pandemic boom would last forever, and that passion, not practicality, would keep sales alive. Harley-Davidson led the charge, pushing their flagship models well above $30,000, assuming brand loyalty would carry the weight. Indian motorcycles followed suit, bundling high-tech options into machines that now cost more than compact cars. Meanwhile, Ducati, BMW Motorrad, and Triumph all hiked prices without adjusting to the slowdown in demand. What began as premium positioning quickly turned into overreach. Behind the scenes, executive teams assumed riders would either stretch their budgets or finance long-term. They did not anticipate the triple blow of inflation, rising interest rates, and a generational shift away from aspirational consumption. Worse, they overproduced inventory based on faulty projections, believing strong early 2021 numbers would continue. Instead, they flooded showrooms with motorcycles the average buyer could no longer afford or no longer wanted. As a result, production cuts, layoffs, and financial retractions followed. But the damage had already been done. By treating the market like a bottomless ATM, these manufacturers wrote checks their customer base could not cash. The emotional fallout from that betrayal leads directly into the next chapter, because behind every sale that didn't happen, there is a rider who walked away from a dream they once built their life around. The riders left behind. For decades, motorcycling was more than a purchase. It was a lifestyle, a rite of passage, and in many cases, a lifelong identity. Riders built communities, friendships, and memories around the machines they loved. But in 2025, many of those same loyalists are discovering that the industry they helped build has priced them out entirely. The financial barriers have become insurmountable. Riders who once financed bikes at 5% interest are now staring at double-digit rates, even with good credit. Insurance premiums have doubled in some states, and the cost of a new motorcycle from even mid-range brands like Yamaha or Kawasaki now regularly exceeds $20,000. For the average working-class rider, it's no longer a stretch, it's a shutout. Worse still is the emotional toll. Riders who've spent their lives loyal to brands like Harley-Davidson, Honda, and Suzuki feel abandoned. These were the companies that once prided themselves on accessibility, community outreach, and entry-level options. Now many of them cater to a boutique crowd, urban professionals, tech buyers, or status chasers, leaving longtime enthusiasts to wonder when they stopped being the audience. Riders who came from blue-collar backgrounds, who worked overtime to afford their first Sportster or Rebel, now look around and see an industry that no longer reflects them. That sense of disconnection is driving people out of the market entirely. But for those still trying to stay in, another trap awaits. The used market, which once offered a lifeline, is now collapsing under its own weight. The used market death spiral. The used motorcycle market has always been the safety net of the industry. For new riders, it was a way to enter the world without breaking the bank. For seasoned veterans, it was a way to upgrade, trade, or experiment with new styles. But in 2025, that safety net has unraveled, and it's dragging everything down with it. It started with repossessions. As interest rates soared and buyers fell behind on payments, banks began reclaiming bikes at a record pace. Those repossessed motorcycles flooded the used market, tanking resale values across the board. Trade-in values dropped by more than 30% in under a year. Dealers became hesitant to accept trades, knowing they would likely sit unsold for months. The result? A frozen market. Sellers cannot find buyers willing to pay what their bikes are worth. Buyers are hesitant, waiting for prices to drop even further. And dealerships, stuck between unsold new inventory and worthless trade-ins, are unable to offer meaningful deals. Everyone is stuck, waiting for someone else to blink. Compounding this collapse is the trust factor. Riders are now wary of used motorcycles with questionable histories, especially those coming from repossession lots or over-leveraged dealers. Even platforms like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, once hubs of rider-to-rider trade, have seen traffic fall dramatically. The used market is no longer a fallback. It has become a graveyard of good intentions, false expectations, and financial traps. And while traditional bikes are suffering, the electric motorcycle segment is crashing even harder because the promise of a better future has not been delivered. The electric motorcycle illusion. For the past 5 years, manufacturers poured billions into electric motorcycles, promising cleaner, faster, smarter machines that would redefine the riding experience. Industry leaders said it was inevitable. Media outlets called it the future. But now in 2025, that vision is beginning to collapse under the weight of cost, complexity, and consumer indifference. The problems start with price. A new Livewire 1 still costs more than $22,000. Zero Motorcycles' flagship models sit near the $20,000 mark. And that's before you factor in installation of home chargers, insurance, and long-term battery degradation costs. In an era of rising inflation, these numbers simply don't work. Then there's the issue of range. Despite promises of 200-mile batteries, most real-world electric motorcycles struggle to deliver 150 miles per charge, and recharging is not quick, especially outside major metro areas where charging stations are sparse. For touring riders, commuters, or those who ride for freedom, waiting several hours at a charger is not just inconvenient, it's a deal breaker. And yet, perhaps the greatest disappointment is emotional. Riders did not fall in love with motorcycles for efficiency or environmental impact. They fell in love with sound, vibration, connection, and control. Electric motorcycles remove those visceral elements. No clutch, no shifting, no growl, just a hum and a scream. That technological sterility has made it hard for electric motorcycles to capture the heart of the culture. What began as a revolution has now become a stalled experiment. And in the next chapter, we'll see how history warns us that the brands who cannot learn from their mistakes will be the first to vanish. Lessons from the last crash. The last time the motorcycle industry stood this close to collapse was in the wake of the 2008 global financial crisis. Back then, consumer credit vanished almost overnight. Disposable income evaporated, and the very lifestyle that motorcycles symbolized was suddenly replaced with financial fear. The crash hit every brand, but it didn't hit them all the same. Harley-Davidson suffered a 30% drop in domestic sales and was forced to offload its struggling MV Agusta brand to stay afloat. Yamaha slashed production and closed plants. Honda, always the silent giant, responded with strategic restraint, cutting only what was necessary and preserving its engineering pipeline. Even Victory Motorcycles, which had been gaining ground as a serious player, couldn't hold the line. It eventually folded into Indian, leaving loyal owners behind. Dealerships shuttered across the country, unable to survive with showrooms full of unsold inventory and banks that no longer wanted to floor plan them. But here's the twist. Many of these companies learned the wrong lessons. Rather than build resilience through affordability and loyalty, they built luxury price tags and marketing hype. Rather than expand access to younger, budget-conscious riders, they doubled down on touring models priced like new cars. The industry focused on image, on prestige, when the real lesson of 2008 was that stability comes from scale, adaptability, and trust. That lesson is now coming back to haunt them. These shifts in pricing and demand are huge, and we've got the facts to back it up. Stay ahead of the curve. Subscribe, hit like, and leave your thoughts below. Who survives this firestorm? Not every motorcycle brand will weather the storm ahead. The collapse is not just an economic event, it's an evolutionary filter. Those who survive will not be the loudest or the flashiest. They will be the leanest, the most adaptable, and the most in tune with what riders actually want in the post-collapse era. Harley-Davidson, for all its cultural weight, is dangerously exposed. Its pricing strategy has alienated younger riders, and its inventory problem is now devouring its dealership network. Unless it pivots drastically toward affordability and simplicity, its survival may depend on foreign markets, not American loyalty. Indian, despite high build quality, suffers from similar problems. Its flagship models are simply too expensive for the current climate. On the other side of the spectrum are brands like Royal Enfield. It has quietly built an empire out of modest horsepower, classic design, and approachable pricing. These are not halo bikes. They are everyday motorcycles built for riders who want to ride, not show off. That simplicity is suddenly a strength. Honda and Kawasaki are better positioned than most. Their vast production networks and diversified lineups allow them to pivot faster. Their strategy is not built around one class of rider, but around scale. If they lean into smaller displacement models and embrace aggressive financing, they may dominate the comeback. The industry's survival will not be universal. It will be selective. And when the dust settles, it will be very clear who built for endurance and who built only for hype. The final warning. This is not just a crash, it is a reckoning. And if the motorcycle industry fails to act now, what we are witnessing in 2025 will not be a temporary decline. It will be the beginning of permanent erosion. There are signals everywhere. Financing is no longer accessible to everyday buyers. Insurance premiums are surging. Young riders, the lifeblood of any sustainable market, are choosing e-bikes, scooters, and even public transportation over motorcycles. And at the same time, manufacturers are still betting on high-margin machines that no longer match consumer demand. That is a recipe for collapse, not recovery. If brands continue building motorcycles only for the top 5% of earners while ignoring the remaining 95, they will find themselves in a shrinking echo chamber. If dealerships continue treating trade-ins like liabilities, they will accelerate the destruction of resale value, erasing loyalty in the process. If the entire industry continues to believe that buyers will endlessly absorb inflated prices, they are gambling with a customer base that is already walking away. It's clear that things are about to get much tougher for riders and dealers alike. Stay informed and stay ahead. Subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment with your thoughts on where this market is headed. See you next time.